Hello, everyone. This is Bill Carroll of, Team MBS Media. And I'm going to be joined momentarily by, I think, the person who may have his fingers pressed as firmly as anybody anywhere in our country on the pulse of the Atlantic Coast Conference, and that is one Jeffery Fann of Talking ACC Sports. And amongst other things, we'll discuss, obviously, the conference as a whole. It's immediate uh, future, of course, its recent past, and of course, obviously, uh, a little bit about the present. But most importantly, the House settlement, how the ACC is structured to survive and maybe even thrive in the NIL era. And then I guess the other thing we're going to take a long, hard look at, of course, is just college football, right? In the conference, the ACC is a proud and dynamic football conference that's produced a bunch of Hall of Famers, produced a bunch of first round draft picks, and of course, has, speaking of Hall of Fame, has one William Stephen Belichick, a future Hall of Fame coach, who has made a lot of noise. Some of it non-football related already, but also has actually done a really good job of bringing in talent. At one point, North Carolina, and I grew up in the 757, the Tidewater area of Virginia. At one point, Carolina ran neck and neck, and sometimes even above some of the Virginia schools like UVA and Virginia Tech in terms of getting top-level talent from the state to come. And if the early returns are a long-term harbinger, we're going to see the Tidewater area go back to providing a lot of talent to the University of North Carolina. So hopefully that will happen. And like I said, I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about the House settlement and what it means in the large, right? And then we're going to talk about how the ACC is affected by it. I'm joined, of course, by the only Mr. Jeffery Fann. How are we doing, Jeffrey? Oh, you may be
Doing
muted.
good. Yeah, I didn't unmute myself. Doing good. How are you today?
It has been a lot has been going on. Some of it football related, some of it sports related, some of it personally. But I've been trying to keep up with all of it. Here's what fascinates me about the ACC. One, it is. I mean, obviously, we joked about the name because it is the Atlantic and Pacific and everywhere between. It is this incredibly diverse conference in terms of the types of schools, from some of the smallest schools in the FBS, like Wake Forest, to gigantic schools, right? Enormous schools with 40 something thousand undergraduates, right? You could fit probably uh, all of some of the campuses, right, into some of the subject area campuses of some of the larger schools, right? I mean, I've been on Wake Forest campus. It's not a tiny school, but it's a small school. It's a smaller school, right? And when you look at some, I mean, you've got all these different types of schools. You've got academic institutions. Cal proudly proclaims itself every chance it gets that it's America's number one public university. I think it's their official, like, I think they have officially trademarked that term. You've got, like I said, these schools like Wake Forest. That is, they compete at a high level in athletics, but they clearly talk often and proudly about what they are as an academic institution. And then you have schools that are factories, sports
Yep.
factories. Clemson has solid academics, right? As I'm sure you could tell us all to, everyone's satisfaction. But Clemson clearly, as it's branded to the nation, is a place where you go to see the highest possible level of college athletics, right? I mean, Clemson, most people who don't know that much about college football know the run in, right? The touching of the rock and all that. I mean, people who don't know that much, people who aren't big time fans, know that. The way they know
Mhm.
Inter Sandman at Virginia Tech, the way they know, you know, Ralphie the Buffalo running onto the field. Like, even if you were just casually watching, there's certain things you recognize. Clemson is one of those schools that even casuals, as they put it, recognize. Oh, that's Clemson. Oh, the paw on the side of the helmet. Oh, yeah, that's Clemson, right?
Yep.
People who don't know anything else about college football know Clemson for that. They know, like I said, Ralphie, the Buffalo. Okay, so let's talk about the ACC as it currently stands. It has how many members now, Jeff?
I- 17 and like 3/8 or something.
Right. That's the first thing. It's very strange how the math works in this conference, because you've got these what I like to call, like, almost athletic booty calls, right? Notre Dame, when it needs a little something, calls up the ACC. It's like, hey, are you available? I mean, back during COVID-19, it was sort of like an adjacent member of the conference, almost a full member of the conference during the COVID-19 time.
Hmm.
Then we've got teams that I think will someday be a member of the ACC, right? I think there's schools that are jockeying for position. We'll talk, I guess, a little bit about that, possible future additions to the conference. And then the House settlement, right? Everybody's affected by the House settlement. And the ACC has opted in. So they are now officially participating. And that's going to change college football and college athletics for the immediate and possibly the permanent future. So we're going to talk about those things as well. But let's start with I won't say easier because nothing's easier, but the the more known, the things that are more known. Okay,
Hmm.
so what's more known is that I'm reading everywhere, Jeffrey, that Clemson's back. Hashtag back. So I'll start with that. In your mind, as someone who studies the ACC extensively, is Clemson hashtag back? And if so, why?
Well, this is their most talented team since before COVID, or at least since that COVID team, since the Trevor Lawrence, um, group then. And I think defensively, it's probably their most talented group since 2018. I mean, you go through the lineup with the Peter Woods and Parkers and the Woodas on defense, and I mean, these are guys that are NFL uh, caliber, the Terrell in the secondary, and then the offense. On the offense, a lot of people consider Cade Klubnik one of the top 3 or 4 top returning quarterbacks in college football. Antonio Williams there at wide receiver. They haven't had a lot of playmaking ability there in the last several years, and you know everything is lining up for them to be able to make a run. The talent is there. When you see next year's NFL draft, I mean they're going to have a number of day one and day two NFL picks. But when you say are they back, um, this is a team they haven't beaten a truly quality out of conference opponent in quite a while. They had a win a couple years ago over a pretty good Notre Dame team, but you have to remember, last year they got run out of the stadium against Georgia. They lost at home to South Carolina, a team that's beaten them twice in Death Valley the last 2 times they've played. They played Texas in a game that was largely I would say it was largely uncompetitive until a late run by Clemson kind of made the score a little bit closer than what it really was during most of that game. So they have not played well against good opponents the last few years, and we're going to find out instantly, is Clemson capable of really making a run in the playoffs this year, because they open up the season with LSU in Death Valley, and that I think that's one of the most important games of the last 5 years for Dabo Sweeney and Clemson. I mean, you go into that game and you're at home, and if you perform poorly, I mean, it's not that you can't make the playoffs, but you're off the radar right away. I mean, you're probably waiting until at least South Carolina, to again say, hey, we're capable of doing something here in the postseason, because frankly how the ACC is set up with Florida State down, and they avoid Miami. Louisville will be tricky for them, that game on the road. But I mean, if they really struggle against LSU, they're going to be working the entire season to kind of get back into the playoff committee, and to kind of gain the respect of the national media. So talent wise, they're there. They're going to be one of the most talented teams in the country, but you got to see if they can do it in a game against an LSU team under Brian Kelly that's traditionally not performed well out of the gate. I mean, that's a team. Last year they losing to a really mediocre USC team. Um, they lost to Florida State, blowed out before. I know Jaden Daniels got all that hype, but Jordan Travis outplayed him in that game. and they lost to Florida State the year before. So you lose to an LSU team at home that's not traditionally very good in their openers. Um, those questions are going to just start all back up for them. But the talent's there. There's NFL talent on that team.
So the second most discussed team in the conference, not always for football reasons, Jeffrey, has been University of North Carolina, right? Uh, Obviously, William Stephen Belichick comes in. I didn't think Mac Brown was doing all that poorly, but I do understand the move. It's a chance to announce to the planet that you are serious about football in a way that very few other teams can, right? How many teams can point to a guy that's got more uh, Super Bowl rings than he has fingers on one hand? That's one guy on that list available. You got that one guy. I'm going to ask you, what do you think of Carolina's chances to be a real contender in the conference? And do you think there's more sizzle than steak, or more steak than sizzle to Carolina as a program now?
I think right now they're kind of going off Bill Belichick's reputation of whether they can really make any kind of run in the ACC. They opened the season with TCU. That's a pretty decent opponent on Labor Day night, and if they play well in that game and they get Clemson early in the season, I think that's game number 4. If they perform well, maybe split those games. They could be a 7, 8, maybe 9 win team. But I've been kind of looking through where we have like our top 5 players in the ACC, and I'm not getting a lot of uh, North Carolina players on that list. There's no, Hamptons at running back. There's no Drake Mays at quarterback. I mean, everything is going to be a little bit of guesswork. And okay, who can argue with Belichick being one of the all-time greats? And it's not without possibility that he gets them to play better than a lot of people expect. But on paper, there are at least 5, 6, 7 teams in the ACC that are top to bottom more talented. And what I've heard some people say is like, well, Belichick's done a really good job if they win, 8 games this year. And then on the other side, you're like, well, isn't that what Mac Brown was pretty much doing? But I think the eight wins could be different than what we've seen under Mac Brown, especially um, with the way that North Carolina would start seasons. They typically would start fast under Mac Brown and fade late. I mean, if these 8 wins are spread out with some quality wins, there's no major collapses down the stretch. I mean, it could be looked on a lot differently than what happened towards the end of Mac Brown's career, where it seemed like Carolina was starting out 6 or 7 and 1, and then losing, 4 or 5 games to end the season, including I would say the bowl games, but we know those are pretty meaningless now. But it still remains the same. But I think a really good start for Belichick in North Carolina would be to have a win over TCU on national TV, because that'll put the hype into overdrive. And I mean, Belichick knows how to deal with that. I mean, he had the premier NSFL program team for 15, 20 years, so I think he'll be able to handle it fine, and it'll be managing what comes along with that. But it's all going to, both for Clemson and North Carolina, these openers are massive for them.
I could not agree more. Now, you mentioned in your mind there's 5 or maybe 6 rosters more talented than Carolina's. Let's do that. Let's do your top 5 most talented rosters in the conference. And once again, I mean, you mentioned we don't have to do Clemson again. So I guess 2 through 6 then, since Clemson has already been taken care of. Who are the other teams that you think have a lot of top level talent?
I think Miami has a good solid amount of talent. Carson Beck, the transfer from Georgia, is there. I mean, he's an established quarterback, won a ton of games. Um, they have top talent on the offensive line with Marigoa. Um, they've recruited really well, or recruited better in recent years with Cristobal. So I think they've got solid talent. Um, I think Louisville is returning a good bit of talent, probably the best running back in the ACC, Isaac Brown. Um, who could be, some people even have him as a dark horse candidate in the Heisman going into the season. And then also at quarterback, they have the USC transfer. I think Moss, yeah, Miller Moss there at Louisville, and I think that's a team that is kind of flying under the radar. Louisville, you've got Miami, you have Clemson, um, SMU still has talent coming off the ACC title contending team from last year, and those teams have been talked about a fair amount. But I think Louisville is definitely coming under uh, the radar. SMU with Kevin Jennings. So I mean, right now I would say two is Miami, three overall talent, Louisville, probably four. I think I would put Georgia Tech there, who has also a lot more talent, maybe nationally, than people realize. You've got Haynes King coming back. Now, if you watch the Georgia game last year at Thanksgiving, it's not going to surprise. I mean, they went toe to toe, 8 overtimes in Athens, Georgia. Um, and really had that game won, a double-digit lead with 5 minutes left. A little bit thin on defense and an untimely turnover. Got that game to overtime. But I mean, they physically matched up very well with Georgia, and we know Georgia's consistently one of the three or four most talented teams in the country. So with Georgia Tech, you got Haynes King at quarterback, you've got Rutherford at wide receiver. Um, the Haynes kid at running back, who's a top three or four ACC running back. They have an elite offensive lineman with Rutledge. They have the Penn transfer Vandenberg on the defensive line. Georgia Tech. This is as talented as they've been, um, probably in almost a decade. And we could talk more about them, but the season's really setting up for Georgia Tech to make a run if because the talent is there. The schedule is typically difficult, but it's not overwhelming as it's sometimes been in the past. I still got to play Clemson in Georgia, but a game at Colorado, another important opener. They win that game. I mean, this could be a 9, maybe 10 win team. So I put Georgia Tech probably fourth. I like the talent and what they're bringing back at SMU, probably fifth, and then sixth. I think NC State's been also a little bit under the radar with their talent level. I don't think they can kind of match the first three or four teams, but they've got some good young talent on that team and probably the best tight end in all of the ACC. And I afraid I had to look up his name, like Hawley. Let me make sure I don't want to mess it up. But I remember just looking at him like, okay, they got a stud. Yeah, Justin Jolly there is probably the best tight end in all of the conference. So I mean, those are the teams I'd probably put in the upper half, talent wise.
And because of the world in which we now live, we have to talk about the quote unquote business side of
Yeah.
college football. You and I both know there was always a business side to college football. The thing is that now it's out in the open, right? Now we know it's there. It's like when they walk behind the screen in Wizard of Oz, right? And the wizard's like, pay no attention to the man behind the screen. But now we all could see the man behind the screen.
Yeah.
NIL and now the most recent version of it, because there now is a new mechanism for enforcement, at least on paper. There now are roster limits. There's now direct involvement of the institution in NIL, where before there was a sneeze guard or whatever term you want to use that used to keep the institution from having its, grubby little paws directly involved with NIL. So, how do you think the House settlement changes things for schools in the ACC? And do you think there's any particular schools that will benefit, or any schools you think might be hurt by the House settlement?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's really a complex one to
Yeah,
answer.
I apologize, Jeffrey.
No,
I hate
I
to put
mean,
I tried to ease you into it.
yeah, I mean, it has to be asked and discussed, and I mean, I actually, it's been a little time when we talked about this offline, trying to get a feel for the ACC teams, and it's just hard to give an answer where a lot of them are at. I mean, I think certain schools like Clemson, I would say Miami, who is just really invested. I mean, they seem to have the budget with NIL that I think those kind of schools they're going to be fine. I, it's more maybe like the Wake Forest,
Right.
um, the Boston colleges. How are they going to manage it? I know all the ACC schools are opted in, um, but how are they going to distribute that money? What about a school like Virginia, who I think is affected in a different way, or a Stanford? Maybe put Virginia and Stanford, who have such um, great Olympic sports traditions, and even North Carolina. How will this affect Olympics sports? You've heard some rumors that some schools, may have to end up dropping. It may end up dropping sports. So
Right.
you mentioned it at the beginning, the diversity of geography when it comes to the ACC schools. There's also a massive um, amount of diversity when it comes to how the schools uh, manage their sports. um I think a school like Miami is really invested, into their football, into their men's basketball, and not nearly as invested in the other Olympic sports as a Stanford, as a Virginia. North Carolina is heavily invested in a lot of the Olympic sports, the field hockeys, the lacrosses. Wake Forest just won a national title
Right.
in men's tennis, I believe, and it traditionally has been very, very good. At sports uh, like
Golf and
golf,
tennis
golf,
powerhouse. Yep. Yep.
yeah, powerhouses. And how is this going to affect them? Duke, who is competing at the very highest levels in basketball. There was even a rumor that they had spent somewhere, gosh, what was the number? It was just unbelievable. They spent on the basketball team last year. You saw it in the NBA, maybe it was like 15 or 20 million. It might have been even higher. But you just watch the NBA draft. I mean, their whole roster was drafted. So, I mean, from a talent standpoint, they made the Final Four, which was some people still considered a disappointment. But you made the Final Four, and even if your team arguably was probably the most talented in the country, you still, that's a banner that's getting hung up. And so Duke is extremely invested in men's basketball, and may not be putting in that kind of money into football, even though they are investing more in football than you would imagine. And but still, that's a school where basketball drives the bus. uh,
Right.
so I know I'm not going to really give a good answer to this. It's just because I don't think we don't know how these schools are going to, how they're going to invest, how much they're going to um, try to maintain the ones that are elite at the Olympic sports. How are they going to distribute it? Because if the way I understand it, you don't necessarily have to there's not an exact model for how
Right.
to distribute it. Some may say, it's worth more to us to continue being good at men's and women's tennis, and allocate a little bit more of that money than school A versus school B on that. And and that does make it difficult, um, because of not only the diversity of enrollments and geography, but the diversity of how these athletic departments have been managed. And then with the ACC, there's another nuanced part of that, is how much money will they get from the media rights? Another part of that business, because the ACC is not going to split that evenly. So you're an athletic director trying to plan a budget, and that in that case, football is driving the bus on television ratings, and that's what's doing it. Um, and then you get $10 million less than you would have in a previous year, or maybe another school gets $10 million more.
Right.
there's just so many different nuances to this. In particular, the ACC, I think, is going to be really challenged how they manage it, because they don't. Let's be honest, they don't have the stability of the SEC
Nope.
or the Big Ten. They have this brand initiative, which no one else has, and then they're still a high performing conference. In the Olympic sports, I think
Yep.
they had two of the top four teams in the Directors Cup,
Yep.
or something. So from that perspective, they're in a unique position when it comes to that. And speaking of what's going to invest in, I mean, this is affecting all conference. Look at Texas Tech in softball. I mean, they ended up pulling the girl from Stanford that took them to a national title as a pitcher, and now they're drawing players from SEC schools. I mean, they're going all in to be an
Yeah.
elite softball team. And what sports are you going to invest in? And by the way, when it comes to this brand initiative, when the Big 12 did it 15 years ago in 2010, and Nebraska and Missouri, Texas A&M got all frustrated with Texas having that. You know that that brand initiative, I think, was ahead of its time.
Yep.
But and not just because the ACC is doing it, but you already hear the Big Ten is very likely to institute that in their next media rights. The University of Washington athletic directors mentioned it, and I guarantee if the Big Ten does it, and Alabama sees Ohio State making 20 million more than them, they're going to do it too.
Yeah.
And then if three conferences are doing it and the Big 12's not going to do it, they're going to start asking, like, say Colorado's. I don't think Deion Sanders will still be there in 5 years, but if he's there in 5 years, his school, Colorado, draws massive ratings
Yep.
with Deion Sanders. They're going to start asking, like, well, wait a minute now, and
Right.
and so I think you'll see this brand initiative take hold
Right.
in all
Yep.
of the P4 in the next 5 years. The ACC just happened to do it first in this era. I know the Big 12 did it way back, but that wasn't the right time for it. And now it seems, right or wrong, this seems like the time that this is going to be that way. I mean, Ohio State, they're getting kind of tired of being on Big Noon every week and getting paid the same as Rutgers and Minnesota.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. And then when you add to that the back pay part, right?
Yeah.
So when you are, and I saw Mark Ingram react to this, right, when they were talking about this on, I guess their group, right, with Leinert and Urban and all that, and Ingram was like, almost like had his notebook out, like, how far back does it go? Like he was
Yeah,
checking,
like,
to see.
I think 2015.
He was about to be on the phone to his agent, like, back pay. That's going to hurt some programs, right? Some of these schools don't have an extra few $1,000,000 to pay to players that played for them 6-7 years ago.
Right.
They don't have it to give to the players they have now, let alone the players who are now working as mortgage bankers or on television, as broadcasters or whatever it is. And I wonder if, well, this is going to get weird and complicated. If a guy was ended up being a first round draft pick, but is now due back pay, can he simply say, if you're, I'm good, you can hold on to it, or does he have to officially donate it back? Or I don't like. It's going to get interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because in addition to the now money and the future money, there's past money, right? You've got these three different buckets, as you just mentioned. You've got your future money, which are, future money. Everyone's excited about the future money. You got your present money, which, I mean, this just happened, right? July is when it all goes live, and that's just a few days away. Woo! I mean, like, used to be my dream at one point was to work in athletic administration. Now they're going to earn their money for real, Jeffrey, right? They're going to earn their money for
Yeah,
real.
and now they're hiring, like, former pro sports executives, just
Yep.
guys who can just navigate this, and that might be something that's in Belichick's favor coming from the NFL. He's going to treat it like a
Yep.
I mean, it is. He's going to treat it like a business, and it is a business.
It's a business. It has been for a while, but now it's, like I said, the secret is out. Now everybody knows it.
Yep.
Before we wrap it, and I know thank you so much for your time. there's still going to be some other shoes to drop regarding what we just talked about, NIL and the House settlement, because there's going to be some more. I promise, more lawsuits. In case you're wondering, I promise you, there'll be more. We'll be, my mother's dream at one point for me to go to law school. My mother was an attorney, and now sometimes I think she may have been right. Just to cover college sports correctly, you may want to have at least some understanding of the law. But as it stands, I know it'll change some more, but as it stands, we now have the ability of, you mentioned Miami. If Miami is to finally move into the position where I think Miami fans always thought they would be when they joined the conference, this might be it, right? This might be the thing that sends Miami to where it sits atop the conference year in and year out, which I think Miami fans, like I said, assume would just happen naturally. Now it may happen because, as you said, Miami, they care about baseball. They've had a very good baseball program. They care about basketball-ish, right? They have a solid basketball program. But that's about it. I mean, that they really care about. They've had good golfers in the past, but they're not a golf powerhouse. I mean, just being in Miami, Florida, there's going to be golf, but they haven't prioritized it. And tennis, they've done well in tennis, but they haven't thrown a lot of resources at it. It's just the natural flow of talent. South Florida has a lot of really good tennis players, and high school tennis in South Florida is ridiculously good. So all you have to do is sort of like throw the bait into the water, and they get a certain amount of tennis players. Track and field should be amazing, but it isn't. That's another show. Track and field, with all that South Florida speed, frankly, should be better at Miami than it is. But it's solid. It's a solid program. But they don't, they have other programs, but they don't have to talk about them. They have a soccer program, but it should be great. It's okay. Carolina's better at soccer. We talk about some of the top soccer programs. Maryland's usually pretty good. I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. This is the hard part, but the other hard part. Does the conference, in your mind, continue to expand? Does it do both? Does it shed a couple of members, maybe replace them? And if so, I mean, we mentioned Stanford and UVA by name. Do you think maybe they get pushed off the island or Wake Forest gets put? And if so, who might replace them? And then last but not least, if there is a further expansion / contraction, does that eventually, already the ACC is hard to keep track of, as we just pointed out. Does it begin to lose its ACC-ness? I don't know how else to put it. It's what made it feel like the ACC. Because already for me, it's hard to identify. I mean, I grew up watching ACC sports. I grew up in Virginia. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia, Virginia Beach, and then in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for almost 3 years. So from the time I was an infant until I left to join our armed forces, so that's really almost 21 years of my life were spent in ACC country, watching ACC sports. And you could wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I could name all the teams in the ACC without hesitation. Now I have to break out a spreadsheet and just check to make sure it hasn't changed. So that was my last and most complex question, probably. Do you see expansion, contraction, a little bit of both? And will the ACC, as you said, stabilize at some point, or will it be this weird amoeba of a conference going forward? And enjoy that question as we get ready to close.
Yeah. I think when you look at these conferences and some of the points that you made, I think the SEC is really the only one that still has some kind of sense of regionality to it. And I mean, now they have schools in Oklahoma and Missouri that were not really considered SEC, but I think for the most part they've maintained a certain sense of regionality. But I mean, now you have the Big Ten that's in Los Angeles and Oregon and Washington. I mean, this in a school in Rutgers. I mean, it's not a Midwestern conference anymore. The and the Big 12. You used to look at that as a conference that kind of went up through Texas and through the Great Plains, and now it's West. It's got a school in West Virginia, and and a school in Florida. So I think in that regard, the ACC is not unique. I think the regionality that made these conferences what they were years ago doesn't exist. But as long as for the ACC, as long as they still have that core on Tobacco Road, which is where the ACC kind of has its origins with North Carolina and NC State and Duke and Wake Forest. As long as that exists, there will still always be an ACC-ness to the um, league. Um, but yeah, it's dwindling. I think just like it is for everyone else. Um, but I don't think you're going to see really much movement in the next 2 or 3 years. I think pretty much everyone is pointing to the end of the decade for what's going to happen with the league. So there's going to be short-term stability. I mean, this has probably been the quietest summer when it came to like real actual realignment news than as we've had um, in 3 or 4 years, and I think it'll be largely that way next year too. But when you get into 2027 and then you wonder, what are the Big Ten and what are the SEC going to do? I mean, are they trying to expand with the Clemsons and the Florida States, and then potentially, um, is the Big Ten eyeing Atlanta and Georgia Tech, or they want to go north with the North Carolina and the Virginia schools, um, and I think you'll start hearing some real buzz in that 27 28 time frame. And then again, it becomes very complicated because how many schools do these teams want to expand by? Does it become even worth it all that much for the Big Ten and SEC to expand? I mean, they already have the biggest contracts. It's pretty well noted that no schools left on the table outside of Notre Dame are additive to these deals. I mean, you add a brand is that as big as they are, you add a Clemson or a Florida State, and they're not going to make the contracts bigger. They just won't. It's a fact. But what they may do, you 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 expand with those schools, and maybe with Clemson you enhance your football in the Big Ten, or you add another huge brand in the SEC. But do they really truly want it? I don't think it's a given. I mean, uh, I think these some ACC schools are looking. They want that invitation more than those conferences may necessarily want to invite them. And so I think that does stabilize things in the short term. But you get to 2030, and who knows what the landscape is absolutely it's gonna look like. And now you have the Big Ten with this brand initiative. Potentially looks like they're going to go in that direction. Um, hey, if I'm Minnesota, why would I vote for Florida State, who's going to be considered a bigger brand than me and take a bigger piece of my pie? I mean, it's this is impossible to predict. Um, the next 5 years. My feeling is that by the end of the decade, the ACC may lose a couple of schools. I would say maybe Clemson and Florida State are the most likely. They are the biggest brands. But then after that, North Carolina is highly coveted. Virginia, the Cavaliers with their location coveted. I think for the Big Ten, moving south into Atlanta with Georgia Tech, it's not necessarily owning that region, but I mean there are a ton of Ohio State fans in Atlanta, and and Big Ten fans, and now having a game there. It's great for their recruiting. Miami, who I thought at one time, would be a pretty popular selection for the Big Ten, is now being sued by Wisconsin for, potential player tampering. So, uh, the only thing I feel pretty sure about is that there's not going to be much movement in the next 2 years, and probably I wouldn't expect any team to really move until the end of these media contracts in 2030. So, um, yeah, I think it'll be quiet for the next. And I don't expect any contraction if the ACC does lose a few schools. Um, I would say a school like South Florida would be a popular choice, potentially a Memphis, those kind of schools. Tulane's name has come up. I mean, it's certainly um, not going to have the cachet it once did, but it could still be uh, a viable conference in the way that the Big 12 managed to kind of recover, and even even the Pac-12 has done a fantastic job, kind of like surviving in name. I mean, I
Right.
know they're not a P4, but I mean, they now. I mean, I look at that conference and I'm like, hey, there's going to be some pretty good football matchups over there.
Yep. Yep. And frankly, I think Stanford should go back. But whatever. That's another show. Um,
Yeah, it could be.
Cal and Stanford go home. All is forgiven. But like I said, it's a whole other show. Once again, I do want to thank you so much. Tell everyone, Jeff, where they can find your work, follow you, and what kind of things you're working on, so people can enjoy more of your incredible insights into the world's most interesting conference.
Yeah, you can find me at Talking ACC Sports. That's at TalkinACCSports. Um, they're always tweeting about what's going on in the ACC, and also blogging on allsportsdiscussion.com. Right now, we're going through our ACC uh, player rankings, almost done with that. You can kind of get a feel for which teams look on paper to be the most talented in the ACC. Um, and then also have a podcast. Most Sundays we're previewing the ACC, bringing in guest experts on the other ACC football programs. Have that with uh, All Sports Discussion ASD. That's my co-host Matthew there. So check that out. You can find it on the blog as well. This week we'll be looking at Clemson, but we're about 2/3 of the way done with our previews, and yeah, it's been good. And season's really not far off. You get through July, and it'll be started at the end of August.
It is coming. The train is pulled out of the station, and soon we'll see it chugging down the tracks.
Yep.
Once again, Jeff, I want to thank Jeffery Fann is as good as it gets, people. If you care at all about the very, very, very strange and diverse ACC conference, and I still do, I will always be following this gentleman. Once again, thank you so much for your time, for your talent, for your attention. It is always a pleasure. I will have to speak to you at least one more time before we get to the season itself. And once again, please join us. So this will be up on obviously all of our socials here at Team MBS Media. And once again, at Talking ACC Sports, follow this gentleman. He is the very, very best. We'll have somebody up for you again very, very soon. But once again, this is great.